I put the bolts back in on that side so I wouldn't lose them. And in the meantime, I lost my T30 bit, so I had to get another one. Stupid mistakes. But I got a new toolbox that's supposed to be delivered today. Hopefully it comes. And then I can put my tools back where they're supposed to be and stop losing them. Because it sucks when you do something stupid and you lose the only bit you have. I mean, there's good news that there's oil in that valve cover when I pulled it. I'm hoping there'll be a little in this side too, because I have yet, obviously, to figure out why it's locked up in there. It may have just been sitting for a long time. Maybe when I pull the head, I'll find something that's kind of in there blocking it. Trying to go around the camera here for you guys. But I may shut it off just so that you don't see the back of my head while I'm trying to do something here. I'm trying to get this cover off without bending or breaking anything. Because if nothing else, and that's a good sign that it had oil in it, if nothing else, there are a ton of good parts on this machine that I'll be able to use. See, this side is jammed. There's pressure on this one right now. It is jammed. I can't move it at all. Which might be good news for us, because on the other side, one's really loose, one's fairly loose, one's fairly loose, one's jacked. We might just have a situation where one of the valves is stuck or bad or something along the way, but we won't know. I can't really get leverage on this thing to turn it, because the bolt that holds the flywheel on just either it's one of those real thin ones, like a 3/8 bolt instead of the big 1/2 inch. So when you try to put some torque on that, you'll just shear the bolt off, and then I'll be trying to drill it out of there and all that, and I don't want to shear it off and going the opposite way. It just loosened right off. So I can't really get any pressure on there. I'm going to think this over here for 5 minutes and try to figure out if I can, if I put something through on this plastic cover, I'm more than likely just going to break fins on the air, on the fan. So that probably won't work. But I think that I may try it, just because I can get another fan easily. But if I can get this thing backed up and get the pressure off, it may have just caught the wrong way. There may be some dirt in there. I just want to see if I can loosen it up before I pull this motor off. Piston may be jammed. I don't know. If you put too much pressure, you'll break something. And it's always the plastic. That's not going to move. And it's not going to do me any good to try to get up on there and bust this plastic. I'm going to pause this for a few minutes and think this over. Okay, I've taken a few minutes to think this over, and I have two ways of going about it. And both of them kind of suck. I can remove the motor, which means I'm going to have to take all the belts off. It's fairly easy, but then climbing underneath of there and taking the 4 mounting bolts out of the motor to take it off, which is eventually probably what I'm going to have to do. It would make it easier to put this up on a bench, get it away from all this plastics and all this stuff, to be able to get all of my tins off to be able to pull the heads. However, I don't know what's causing this yet. So going through all that trouble to remove the motor, then pop the heads off and find out it's something silly that could be done right on the motor. It's half a dozen of one and 6 of the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, leave it in place. I'm going to take out the 4 bolts that hold on the intake manifold. There's 2 bolts on this side and 2 bolts on this side. I may have to take the magnetos off. I don't know. But right now what I'm going to try and do is take out the 4 bolts on the intake and the 4 bolts on the exhaust, take the muffler off, see if I can get at least 1 tin off of one side so I can get to this head. I'll probably do that side because that's the one it's jammed on. I stuck a screwdriver in. This piston is about halfway back. I'm sorry, this piston is closer to the edge. This one's about halfway back. It may have something in there, so I'm going to attempt to take off the intake, the exhaust, and the tins on that side and pop that head. I don't know whether I'm going to put this in the video or not, but I'm going to film it at least so people can see what's going on if I decide to put it in. Alright, I don't know whether this will make it into the video or not, but for now, take off the intake manifold. Try not to lose any bolts. Gasket set for these machines is not very much. You can buy an entire set of gaskets to rebuild the whole machine for just a few dollars. So I'm not real concerned about that. What I'm looking to do probably gonna have to. I don't need to remove the carburetor and everything at the moment, I don't think. As long as these bolts are not in the head, I should be able to take out the exhaust bolts so that I can take out the bolts of the head and slide it straight out after I get all the tins off. But we'll see. You know what? I'm not going to film this. I'm not. Okay, I've decided that I am going to go ahead and pull the motor off. No matter what happens, it's probably going to be a good idea for me to go through the whole thing. And we could have a serious problem here. So I'm going to put the valve covers back on it just so I don't lose anything. I'm not going to put the plastics or anything back on it. Then all I have to do is disconnect that wire harness, take these wires back off, the negative wires back off the starter, undo the fuel line, which is easy, just pop the fuel line off, undo 4 bolts underneath, and the whole thing will lift off after I take the belts out. So I will show you that putting it back together, but taking it apart right now, I just can't mess with the camera at the same time. Alright Kelly, this is for you. A spring goes right here where your middle finger is. It comes to the back and comes through this hole right here and goes in that little hole right there. You have that spring. The belt on the right hand side, the driver's right hand side, goes above the fan pulley on top of the gearbox, goes back to the other gearbox over that top pulley, then it goes diagonally that way around the front side, the mower front side of the drive pulley, then back around this way and around this pulley right here, and this is the lever arm that moves back and forth with the spring to release the tension. Okay, that's the back of the machine. That's the muffler right here. You were able to work this lever. You were able to work the belt off high enough to drop the PTO clutch and push that lever all the way in, and then bring it back as you pushed up the PTO clutch. The back side of this belt goes straight from pulley to pulley on top of the pumps. Then on each side it goes forward. Then it comes back and meets around this pulley in the middle and goes around this pulley here. Okay, I did not film taking the belts off. I did not film taking off the PTO clutch, which I had to break out the compressor for and the air hammer to vibrate off the bottom. Otherwise, all I took off was the throttle cable. I decided I was going to remove the motor just to make it easier. There's a spring that holds each belt on in place. Now I will show how those go back on when I'm putting this back together and I figure out how to get a better angle. But in the meantime, oops, I forgot to take off the fuel lines, and that really hurts my leg. It really hurts my leg when stupid stuff like that happens. Try this again. Really? You're going to do that? You're going to act like a gravity feed when they don't want you to? Thank you. Come again. Damn, something was really jamming into my leg. The motor weighs about 75, 80 pounds, I think. It's not too bad. Deck's fairly clear. The wet oil you see is from me taking off the valve covers. There's no rust on this thing at all. I have no idea why, but they put that stupid belt on in a way that you have to take off the PTO clutch with the second pulley, work the belt off of it, feed the belt correctly. I'll show you when I put it back together, maybe. Don't buy these box store pieces of garbage, because they're a pain in the butt. But once it's back together, it's a decent homeowner machine. Wouldn't go out and start a lawn service with it, but it's going to be a good machine, I hope. Next step is going to be put this up on the bench, crack that all apart, and see what we find on the inside. But that's going to be it for this video. It's going to be a mini part. So thanks for stopping by. We'll see you on the next one. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Monkey Wrench. I'm Kelly, the monkey with the wrench. This is going to be part 2 of I bought a $75 zero turn, and that is this Toro. I believe it was a 42-inch or 44-inch cut, and the guy that sold it to me, brought it to me, had no idea what was going on with it. It's a 42-inch cut. It's just a box store zero turn. It's the Timecutter. And it was in really good shape, it looked like, through the pictures, and I didn't question it. And I said, you know what, bring it to me. He said, I know it needs a battery, and I know it needs a starter. And when it got here, the starter was laying to the side. If you saw video number 1, starter was laying to the side. The battery's here, and the arm, or the tab where you connect your cable to, had snapped off. I haven't even tried it. It's only a year and a half old. It may even take a charge, and I may be able to fix that. But for the moment, I put a battery in it. I hit the key. It went about a quarter turn and locked up. And I went, I don't care. I got other motors over there. Motors come out of those machines will interface with these as long as the shaft is the same diameter and length. The motors don't matter. So I can always get motors. So the first thing I did was go ahead and decide, okay, this thing's locked up. And unlike other YouTube channels that will post a video called Locked Up Motor Fix This Easy, what they don't tell you is there's a reason the damn thing locked up. Usually the piston rings have swelled inside the sleeve. They've scored it up because they ran it with no oil in it. You know, there's a crack in the piston, something wrong with the cam, something wrong with the crankshaft. Who knows why? And it's great video that people, you know, can take that and go, look, see, I can unlock the machine and change the oil and put some marble mystery oil or some JB in there and it loosened right up, and look, it's running. And what they won't tell you is a half hour into their next cut, it won't be running anymore, because whatever the problem is that caused it in the first place, they didn't fix. So considering the cost of rebuilding a motor, if you've seen my channel before, you know that I have rebuilt motors from scratch. Motors that thought were shot, rebuilt them from scratch. I enjoy doing it, and I like to show you guys it. So what I got here, this is a Kohler 22 or 23 horse, I don't remember, and I went ahead and I took it out of the body, and I couldn't turn it by hand. If you saw the last video, I could not get it to turn. I attempted to take a pry bar on top with a proper socket, and all it did was loosen the flywheel nut, and when I went to turn it the opposite way, it tightened it up to the point, and the leverage kept going, and I didn't want to shear the top off of it and then have to drill that out or replace the crankshaft. So there is a real easy trick you can use. If you take off all your plastics, this is your magneto. That's what this is. Goes to your spark plug. And right here on the magneto, hopefully you can see that, where the magneto bolts on are these two tower posts. And that is right next to your flywheel. So take a small screwdriver, a very small screwdriver. You don't want a lot of leverage, because if you bust this off, this tower that holds the magneto, you're completely screwed. The motor's trash and you got to redo stuff. So take that, put it right against that tower, put it in one of the teeth, and start trying to move it. If it doesn't want to move one way, go to the opposite side, which you can't see, but I'm going to go to the opposite side because this is a twin. So it has a magneto on the left side and another tower. Go in it the other way, put a little bit of pressure on it, and see if you can start spinning it. So this thing was locked, and I couldn't figure out why, and then this happened. Maybe you can hear it on camera, but probably not. Okay, so while I'm out here messing with it and thinking, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I've had a long day and I'm going to work on this tomorrow, as I'm spinning this around, there's my new starter. This is your magnet set, okay? And as I'm spinning that around, I'm hearing this high-pitched squeal. And there's your problem. This magnet has worked its way out. Okay, these will get corroded. The magnet will find its way to move sometimes. This magnet has moved its way out, and it is jamming itself on that magneto right there. I cannot move that sucker. And I think that's what caused the jam, not the motor. So, am I unhappy that I uninstalled this motor to find that's the problem? Hell no. You know why? Because if that's the problem, and I loosen that magneto, which I'm going to do in a second, and kick it backwards and that sucker spins, I'm going to stick a borescope in there. I'm going to take a look and make sure that we don't have any piston problems where the rings might have gouged out the sleeves. And I'm going to put it back together. Now here's the thing. Was it a pain in the butt to take it apart? No, I've done this, I don't know, hundreds of times. There's only 4 bolts that hold that motor to that frame. Is it easy to get to? No, I had to take off the rear wheels to get it off. The way these box store machines are put together, the actual drive belt is in a space that big with lips, and you got to kind of work your way around, taking springs off, doing all kinds of stuff. The motor itself is connected by a fuel line and a plug, an electric plug, and wires that go to the starter. So taking it off can be a pain in the butt, but if you don't rush yourself, and I have to remind myself, don't rush, brother. It don't matter whether you get this thing off today or tomorrow or whatever. Just go slow, go one at a time. And an hour and a half, 2 hours passes, and she lifts right off. So am I unhappy I took it apart? No. I pulled the valve covers. One of the valves was kind of stuck in one position, so I'm going to pull those again. But right now, I'm going to back this magneto off. I'm going to loosen these 2 bolts. I'm going to back the magneto off and tighten that back down so they'll stay in place. And then I'm going to give this motor a spin and see if she'll spin freely. If she will, see, I can start it right there. I can run a wire right to my starter. I can start it from the starter, from a battery. All the wires are in place except for the kill switch. I can run a kill switch. My point is, I'm probably going to bench start this motor, and when I get it set up, I'll show it to you. But the first thing I want to do is find out why that magnet is sticking out and why all of a sudden it has decided that it wants to hit the magneto. Now I can see there where it just started taking the rust off. So this is a new problem. This thing's been setting for years. This one's nice and smooth. This one's not. I may need to replace that magnet setup, which is fine. I can order one of those. But this right now is hitting that magneto, so let's back that up. Clunk, it just hit and stopped. So let's back up the magneto and see if she'll spin normal. Alright, all I'm doing, loosening the magneto. And yeah, you can bench run these things. It'll wobble, it'll shake, it'll make a lot of vibration. But you just find a place where you can hold it. I'll probably use some clamps to clamp it down, just to let it run. But for the moment, I am just backing up this magneto. Most of them have a little slotted section for the bolt to go through so you can adjust it. And I may replace the magnetos. They're looking kind of rusty. For 75 bucks and a few bucks worth of parts, the starter was like 50 bucks. You know, this is a fun little zero to play with, cut the grass with, or, you know, resell it to somebody that needs one. So, momento el trutho. We got plenty of space now. The magneto's not hitting nothing. But she's still locking up. Okay. Well, it was worth a shot. It was hitting. No matter what, it was hitting there. But she locked right back up. I'm going to turn it the other way. You won't hurt it turning it the other way. But we're only getting about a half a turn. So if I put my finger here, that's where I started. Yeah, this thing's only turning about halfway around. I'm getting a half a spin. And it takes 2 spins to open both sides. So there's definitely something going on inside of there. Boy, I was hopeful. But that's alright. That just means that we're going to go ahead and strip this sucker down. Now, I am going to... The reason I pulled it was because there's not a lot of room. When it's on the frame and you have the gas tanks coming and it's all enclosed and everything, you can't really get to it. Let me try and back you up. You can't really get to anything. And there are bolts in some weird places to try to get to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 2 bolts out of the intake on this side and the 2 bolts out of the intake on this side. I'm going to take off my solenoid wire, my kill wire, and I'm going to take off the linkage here. And basically I'm going to take this entire intake off as a single unit. Now, these wires connect up through the front, but that's not a big deal. We've got a airfoil choke here. I got to remember what that looks like. But basically, I'm going to take off all the tins that I need to on both sides. I'm going to take off this throttle setup here. I'm going to take off the muffler, and then I'll bring you back. It's just a lot of pulling bolts. If you don't know how to do it, there's little hidden bolts everywhere. There's one here, there's one here, there's one up underneath the underside, there's one up under here. And you take all this stuff off so you can expose the heads, and then I'm going to pull the heads. And when I do, I'll be able to see the piston, I'll be able to see the sleeves, and I'll be able to find out what the heck is in there causing this problem. Because right now, there's no spark plugs in there. So, there's no vapor lock, hydro lock, none of that. Everything's clear. And this thing's just been sitting, and I have a sneaky suspicion there's some rust in there or something. Maybe we can hone them. and clean them up just a little bit, but let's get it apart and see what it looks like before we go to all that trouble. Alright, Kelly Cakes. These two springs right here, let's see if I can find them. Right here, these two go in the same hole. This one goes to the top, it connects right to this arm right here. This one goes down underneath and connects to that arm right there. On the back side there's a hole, and the hook goes towards the inside of the motor, if you can see it in there. And then here is your linkage up top. This is the governor, remember. Here's the linkage and the spring. Make sure those are both reconnected when you put it on. This whole unit here unscrews on both sides, remember, from underneath on both sides after you take off the muffler, so the muffler's last to go on. Don't forget that your ground goes back in here on your left side when the tits are looking at you, and this unplugs, so after you take the manifold off, all that should go with it. This is separate. Remember how that goes on. You can look at it and see which side is which, and now you can take it apart. Alright, let's see what we can do. I got the manifold off, got the muffler off, got the throttle control arm off, emptied it from oil so I could tip it up on its back and do all the things I needed to do to make sure that all came off well. I have a sneaky suspicion-y feeling that this thing's going to be in real bad shape, but we're going to see here in the next 5 minutes. Now this particular tin, the governor arm actually, the tin goes over the governor, and then the governor arm goes on it, and I am not disconnecting the governor arm, so I just loosened all the screws and kind of pushing it out of the way. I don't want to take that off if I don't have to. So right now, we're going to pull these valve cover back off. I don't know whether I'll be able to save this thing, whether it'll be worth saving, or whether I will just take it down to find out what's wrong with it, and then put a replacement motor on that machine. And I might rebuild this at some point, who knows. Not real worried about it. It's a little big. That's a better. That's a better. These are the Huey. Let's see if this little impact gun has enough to take these out. Nope. Alright, so let me get a ratchet. I love my little impact gun. Impact driver. I know I get corrected of my terminology in the comments all the time. But I don't care. That's 2. Oh, I need a stanchion. That means I'm not going to be able to beat on it with my palm. Something just fell over in the shop. It's always good. Man, this hurts. But sometimes it's all you can do. Now it'll come off. If you don't hurt yourself when you're working on a machine, you're doing something wrong. These should be the same length. Check them when you pull them out. I know I didn't take off the rocker arms and push rods, but I'm expecting this whole thing just to come apart in one piece. Now, if I've gotten everything out of it, I should be able to just tap it off. Let me get a hammer. Let's see if she will just tap off. There it goes. Hoo-wee! Don't lose your rocker arms, or your push rods. Again, these are both, they're not the big hollow ones that you see in the Briggs. These are skinnier, and these are solid rods. In the hollow ones, you often find a darker colored one on the exhaust and a lighter color aluminum, brushed aluminum for the intake. That does make a difference, but on these are both the same. When I put them together and twist them, they're not bent. The ends aren't broken off. So it doesn't particularly matter where you put them, when you put them back. Try and put them in the same spot if you care. I don't. Now this looks like it's all right. It's got some corrosion on it, but that does not look to be what our problem was. I can push on this valve and it does open with my fingers. Same thing with that one. So that's not going to be a huge concern. Now, let me try and move this intake. The only thing holding this intake is these set of wires that go through for the harness. But they don't have a plug on them. So I'm just letting it hang. Now this side turns all the way. So my guess is, because it's jamming up now, looking at this piston sleeve, there's no scoring or anything. That's a good sign. So let me entertain you. Good old Robbie Williams. All right. You know why it's always the last thing you check, right? Because when you find it, you stop checking shit. So let's go ahead. My table is special. I took one of the boards out of the center here so that the crankshaft would go in and I could stand it straight up. Just make sure you're in frame. And let's take off this side. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to not beat the crap out of my hand. Again, I'm going to go and get a longer lever so that I can get those head bolts out. Now, if I remember correctly, this is the side where when I pulled this before, the valve was kind of stuck. Now they're both loose. So let's move this out of the way. I'm gonna pause you for a second. I want to keep all of this stuff on the correct side. Just in case, you never know. It could be something silly causing this issue. But we won't know until we get this thing off. So let me go get some leverage. I get a lot of comments, and the other day, I got a couple on the same day. You should be using a torque wrench when you go to put stuff back together. And I just kind of laughed to myself. I'm going to need a stanchion. Oh, I got one done, man. And I laughed to myself, and I actually answered the dude back. And I said, it's funny you brought that up, because I have a torque wrench. I do. It's right here in my hand. And I've maybe used it twice to torque something back down when putting it together. The only reason I use my torque wrench is because it has a nice long handle on it. And it's for loosening bolts. I never use it to put them back together. Ah, come on. Don't you want to play nice? Just gonna twist that. Just gonna twist the whole dang motor. Alright, I guess I'm beating it with my freaking hand. Fine. You ain't hurting yourself. You ain't doing something right. One. But yeah, I rarely torque mower stuff down. You know, some people do, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I just found you can tighten stuff up, and you're pretty much good to go. I don't have any failures of total rebuilds I've done or anything like that. That sucker just don't want to go. And my hand hurts. It's not going to work. It still hurts my hand. Come on, you bastard. Really? I can't really hit here because of the valves. There it goes. Fuck, that hurts. Excuse my language. Sometimes the right tool for the job is your palm. But man, does that hurt. I should get a bigger impact driver, but I like my little guy. And most of the stuff I do, it's plenty strong enough. Somebody torqued these in and made it a bitch to get them out. I also hear a lot about how I should be using Loctite. I rarely use Loctite. Unless it's a problem where something came loose, then I fix it and it comes loose again, then I'll use Loctite. But for the most part, oh, that's full of some nasty, that's water, boys and girls. Well, there's your problem. That had water in the cylinder. Whew. All right, now we dropped it in our push rods. I'll know here in a second whether this thing is salvageable or not when I get it all cleaned out. But again, putting my push rods together, spinning them next to each other, there's no bends or bows. So they're in good shape, the ends are good. They're good. Put that there. Put this over here. And she'll spin now. Well, she'll spin to a point. But it's full of rust and garbage and crap. This is one of those perfect machines where some YouTuber will put some transmission fluid in there or some PV blaster, and oh, it didn't look too bad, so I got her to loosen up, and she spins now, so it's running, we're good. And that makes a great video, people. But it definitely is not what you want to do if you would like your machine to continue running for more than, you know, a few minutes. Let me let you see what it looks like before I start wiping it out. Yeah, definitely had water in there. I'm really excited though, sorry. When I feel in there with my finger, I don't feel any scoring now. I won't know what it looks like until I get all this crap out of here. So give me 5 minutes to, some of this on the end here, I can feel it, it's hard, it's carbon. But that don't mean that won't come right off. So let me pause this and clean that out, and I'll show you what it looks like. And just so you remember, it's the one on the... Well, there's good news and bad news, and the kid out back with autism's at it again, so there's nothing I can do about that. But if you look inside of there, you can see that there is pitting here, but I'm not sure that that's pitting. I think that's buildup. I think that's some kind of a rust buildup. The rest of the cylinder actually does not look scored. I don't know if you can see that from this angle, and it is getting dark outside. But there is some rust going on about the width of my finger from the lip back. And the good news is, I think we can save this old girl. At best, when I hone this cylinder out, because the rest of the cylinder looks fine, it may lose a tinge of compression when it gets out towards the edge. But I think we can hone this and put some rings in it. I'm about to fill it up with some PB Blast just to kind of let it sit and to see if it'll leak past. And I don't think there's enough in here. But a lot of that might just be a little bit of rust carbon kind of buildup from sitting. And believe it or not, sometimes that'll clean up pretty easily. So I'm just gonna fill this up here. I'm gonna stand it up so it's flat. I'm gonna have to shim it, and I'm gonna put some in there, and I'm gonna give it a couple hours and see if it drains out. If it doesn't drain out, then the rings shouldn't be in too bad a condition. I think I can push that all the way back to bottom dead center and hone this out. I think I can push it back out where I can clean the front edge of that piston and put it back together. We'll see. We'll see what's going to happen. It's either that or, you know, throw the engine block away. So I think we can save this one. So I'll be back with you another day, but by the power of video, you'll be here with me now. Okay, guys, it's been about 24 hours since I filled this up with oil. I didn't put a lot in there. I actually used PB Blaster, and a tiny bit might have leaked by, but for the most part it's all still held in there, and you can probably see better now the kind of corrosion that I'm dealing with on the side of the piston wall. Now it only goes down about the depth of my fingernail. And we're going to do something a little different. Now, I posted a couple of shorts on this engine, and I've gotten a bunch of questions. I've gotten a lot of views and a lot of questions, and I keep getting the same question over and over. And this is something that I wouldn't normally do on either a repair for a customer or even my own machine. However, this is YouTube, so we get to play around with stuff. Now the question is, if you don't have a hone, which is a expanding sander basically that fits in your drill, some of them are ceramic beads that expand. It's all the same kind of thing. But if you don't have a hone, you're afraid to use a hone, you don't know how to use a hone, blah blah blah, can you do this by hand? The answer is, I'm in my 50s. I'm back in the day when we were kids and we didn't have any tools to work with, and we were just kind of trying to do something to get a couple days of fun out of something. We did do it by hand. Now there's a couple of factors to take into play. When you use a hone and it spins in your drill, it rotates very fast, and it does the entire surface at the same time, the same amount. And when you're sanding, you might sand one section and then turn and sand another section and turn and sand another section. And if you don't sand it the same way in each of the sanding areas, you could sand one more than another. So you could get wear spots in there. The idea is, go to the store, spend 30 or 40 bucks or whatever they are today, get yourself a hone, put it in your drill. It's always going to give you a better outcome. However, this is YouTube. This engine can definitely be fixed, and because I have another sitting right over there that the shaft is the same diameter and length, I can literally take that engine off of that riding mower, strap it onto the zero turn, do a little bit of wiring, and I'm back in business. So I don't care. It's up to me to make videos to show you guys at home whether something can be done or not, and to tell you the truth about it. So here it is. I'm going to use some 600 gram first day with my new lips. I'm going to make some 600 grit sandpaper. I'm going to do it by hand. I am going to do it as wide as I can in a single stroke. Okay? Because if you do short sections a lot like this, and then you move and do short sections, they could be different depths. And wherever the sandpaper overlaps the last stroke could even go deeper. And you could take this perfect circle and elongate it like an oval. So I'm going to take my sandpaper and I'm going to go as wide as I can, trying to get the whole thing at the same time. 600 grit, so very fine. And I'm not going to push very hard. And it could take a while. It could take me 20 minutes. It could take me an hour. But all I'm trying to do is get this corrosion off of there and get it back down to a smooth surface. So I'm not going to show you too much of that. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to use, I got 400 grit sandpaper here. I'm going to spray it down with some PB Blaster. I don't like WD-40. They think it's a miracle oil that does 1,000 things, and I just don't like it. I'm going to use some PB Blaster. The whole thing's been soaking for 24 hours with PB Blaster, and a lot of it has actually just come off. That's what it's for. It's penetrating oil. And I'm going to give it a quick sanding. Not a quick sanding, but I'm going to show you if it can be done by hand. The worst thing that could possibly happen is I don't get it very smooth. And as a result of that, the rings are in good shape. The oil did not leak down past the rings. So we know we have good rings. The piston sat in one place for God knows how long, 6 months, a year. Water got in and rusted the top of it. If the piston had been lower, the entire sleeve would be corroded. So thank goodness it was pretty close to the top. And the worst that can happen is after we get it running again, whatever little corrosion is left on the walls might scrape up the rings a little bit, could cause a little bit of blow by, could cause some smoking. Not a big deal, especially on something that we're just experimenting with. So I want to show you exactly what happens at home. And worst case scenario, it's only one jug that's bad. If I put this thing back together after I hand sand it and run it for 5 or 6 hours, which is what I'll do, and it does start to smoke or get blow by or anything like that, I can pull one head off again real quick. I can take the whole thing apart, I can service it, I can put new rings on, I can do whatever I want with it. And the fact that I bought another machine that has a compatible motor that does run, I've already made the video on that, and it cost me 20 bucks. I don't care. So I have the luxury of doing things you may not be able to do. So I'm going to go ahead and sand this a little bit and I'll bring you back. Now, for those of you out there that say you're ruining that engine block, blah 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 blah, I can always have this machined out and put oversized rings in it. But for a machine that sells in my area of Florida literally for 800 bucks in running condition, when I can buy from my local lawnmower junkyard a running 22 horsepower motor identical to this for 250 bucks, why would I go to all that trouble? When you're dealing with lawnmowers, and I hear it in the comments already, and that's fine, tell me all the comments you want, because that just shows YouTube interaction with my video. Is this a perfect fix? Nope. Will it get you another season with a lawnmower that you already have? for the cost of a sheet of sandpaper, 600 grit. You can use 800 grit if you want. And I'm only showing this on camera for those of you that say, he used a hone, he didn't use sandpaper. Guess what? Using sandpaper. Now, after you sand for maybe every 5 minutes or so, remember, try and sand as evenly as you can with very little pressure. I am barely pushing on this paper at all. You can tell I'm not out of voice, out of breath. So after you sand every couple of minutes, if your machine was like mine and the piston was getting stuck, the rings were hitting the corrosion, which wouldn't allow it to go up, spin it. Because now I'm almost at the top. Oops. I'm almost at the top, which means I've gotten probably 80% of it out of there. Now I've been sanding for, oh, I don't know, 15 minutes maybe. I've got a soaked in PV Blaster piece of sandpaper. In fact, I'm gonna fold it a different way and get a fresh piece on there. This is not a performance automobile that you're taking to the racetrack. It's a lawnmower. And it's only one cylinder on this particular motor because this is a dual. So if I could bring this thing back to life, and here's the new head gaskets and all. I bought gasket kits. So I spent about 35 bucks at my local parts house instead of waiting on Amazon. And I bought new head gaskets, new intake gaskets, new exhaust gaskets. And yes, it took me a while to get this thing apart, sure. It took me probably 2 hours to get it to the point you see it now. That was testing it, that was taking it off the machine, that was bringing it over here, taking the intake off, taking the exhaust, pulling the heads, and finding my problem. And if I can spend 15-20 minutes, a half an hour with some sandpaper and bring this thing back to life so I can use it for another year or two, because remember, you're not pushing very hard. You're barely putting any pressure on there. And if I can save this thing for 40 bucks and half a day of my time, maybe you're thinking about working on motors. You know, maybe you're watching videos on YouTube and you're going, I wonder if I can do that. Maybe, you know, you want to start with some pile of junk that your neighbor has that he says you can have for free and see if you can bring it back to life. That's how a lot of people start. And there's nothing wrong with that. And whether this works or not, and there is still a bit of corrosion on there. Let me see if I can get the camera over here and show you. So it's probably going to take me a good hour to sand that out. I have no idea if you can see. It's too bright here in Florida. I need a shop. You guys need to watch more of my videos so I can make a couple bucks and get a shop. I still have, it's not smooth, I can still feel it. So I'm going to continue to sand, but it's this little lip that I feel right there, that little bit of corrosion that's stopping it from going completely up and down. I'm not hurting the rest here. This is still baby smooth, and we got a little bit of corrosion left on this side right there. So I'm going to work at this for another half an hour, and I'm going to get full rotation on that piston. I'm going to spray it out, and we're going to see if this thing will go back together and run. Okay. Now I've gotten a fresh, clean piece of sandpaper, because this stuff does get into the grit of the sandpaper. I've tried only going down as far as I needed to for the corrosion and not further, because the rest of the cylinder was just fine. And we know the rings were good because I put oil in it yesterday and it did not bleed down overnight. Or if it did, it was very little. So I know my rings aren't blown out, gouged up. I know the rest of the cylinder is good. And now I've been at it for, I don't know, about 25 minutes maybe. And again, my wrist isn't tired, I'm not out of breath, because I'm barely putting any pressure on the sandpaper. Barely. If this were a performance job for some kind of race, if this were a customer job, yeah, I would hone it. I have a hone. But maybe you don't want to go to the store and buy a hone for a job that you'll never do again. Maybe you're just got a machine from your neighbor, like I said, or picked one up at a yard sale for 20 bucks and wondered how far you could go, sort of as a personal challenge to yourself. Can I pull this thing apart and put it back together without losing pieces? Am I capable of it? Can I fix something for just a few dollars? Because if I can, and I can bring it back to life, well, then maybe it's worth buying proper tools and doing this as a hobby. I've gotten over 500 subscribers in the last few weeks, several of which have asked me, should I open a shop? I enjoy working on this stuff. How hard is it to get the tools you need? Is it enjoyable? I want to start this as a hobby. And I like the way you explain things. I like the way you do different things to show us what's possible and not just make it look like a Hollywood video that 5 minutes you fix the whole thing kind of thing. There's a little bit right there that I can feel. But I think we're about there. So before you go out and buy tools you may never need, you may only need once, I want to show you that, yeah, you can do it. Now, again, I don't know how much you can see in there with the sun out here glaring on the camera. It's never going to look perfect because it was corroded, but let's just see if that piston will come all the way to the top now. I'm going to keep it spinning. Look at that, and on the way back down. Go around again. It still feels like there's a tiny nub somewhere that's hitting right about there, but I can easily force past it. And the point of that is that, of course, a honer is going to do a better job at getting the entire thing in each stroke and bring it all down at the same time. But I don't have any plugs in here, and it still feels like it's going to be fine. I'm making it all the way around. I'm going to touch this up a little bit with some sandpaper, maybe a wire wheel, just to clean this off. This has been soaking overnight too. I'm going to touch up a few little high spots that I can feel with my fingers, and we're going to start putting this thing back together. We're not going to put a whole lot into it because, you know what? At the end of the day, I have bought 40 bucks worth of parts. I spent a few hours of my time, which is free. You know, your time is free. And if she blows up, well, we'll take it apart and find out where it failed, and maybe I'll even catch the blow up on camera, and we'll get another good video out of it. So I'm going to keep at it here in a few spots, and then we're going to start putting it back together. Well, guys, when I pulled this thing apart yesterday, it was corroded as anything. Instead of using a hone, I wanted to show you what would happen if you sand it by hand with some sandpaper. Did it work? Do we have full movement back? Hey, looks like it. Check the video. Alright, now we've got it all cleaned up. I'm going to try and get the camera in here closer so you can see The real worn spots were right there, and I could still feel it just slightly. And right there, you can see that. And I can still feel it just slightly, but remember, it was only the depth of my fingernail. So the rest of this piston is still in great shape, and I have cleaned up the top of the piston as well. I'm not feeling any undue pressure or difficulty going through the area. It's just spinning just the way it's supposed to. And remember, when this thing is spinning at 3,200 RPMs, that thing's pumping up and down. It's going to wear itself into the, it's going to wear off anything that I might have left on there. Yes, it could possibly, well, it will scratch the rings ever so slightly. But if you've ever taken rings off, you know they're pretty thick. And I really don't think that it's going to be enough that it's going to cause any major problems. I really believe that. Would I do this again? No. I would take a hone, I would hone it out the best I could. Could I get better results with a hone? The only thing that would be better with a hone would be that it would take it down to a little bit smoother, and it would do the entire thing in one movement all at the same time, so it would definitely not have any high or low spots where you're, you know, you might sand partially here, then partially here, and one might be deeper than the other. So yeah, you can do a better job if you go to the store, spend the money on a hone. If, again, you're just doing this one time, you just want to see if it'll work, blah, 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 try some 600 grit sandpaper. When I went to the hardware store earlier today to pick up some other things for something I was doing on the house, I looked, and it was like, I don't know, $6 for 4 sheets, 4 big sheets of it. So it's not expensive. If you don't have any, run out, grab yourself some 600 grit, grab yourself some 800 grit. I saw 1,000 and 2,000 grit. I wanted to take some material off without causing any issue in this old motor. Now I'm going to clean up the other head. And for those of you that watched the first video, this head was still in good shape, or this cylinder, this was not the problem. And just so you see, that one's still dirty, and that one has full movement too. So maybe I can get them both into the shot so you can see that they're both going up and down without any issues. So at the possibility of scratching the rings and having a little bit of blow by, I think we're going to give this machine another life. I think that for regular homeowner use, cutting your own yard, maybe a half acre, maybe an acre, I think you're going to be fine with this for a while. And you can try it at home if you want to, but don't blame me if you screw something up. So I'm going to clean this other cylinder here. I'm going to clean up these heads, get them all nice and shiny and ready. We're going to put the new head gaskets on. We're going to bolt the heads back on. We're going to set the valves. And we're going to put all the tins back on this thing and fill her up with oil, strap her back down to the machine. For you guys, it'll be the next video, but for me, it'll be a few days from now. We're going to strap it back onto that zero turn right over there. We're going to fire it up, and we're going to cut the grass. So that's going to be it for this video. I just wanted you to see that you could do it with sandpaper if you absolutely have to, or if you absolutely want to. And in the next video, you'll be able to see that it works. Hit the like button, it's somewhere between my chin and my balls. Hit the subscribe button. We have broken past 3,000. We're on our way to 4,000 big time. By the time you see this, we're almost halfway there. So thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.